Anyway, it's 12, and I'm really happy to have you here, Olivier. You were scheduled for last season, but if I remember correct, you caught COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
And I talked to Daniel, who helped me run SQL Friday sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, COVID, that's 0 out of 10 as a grade. You know, it's so we don't need it. So I'm happy you didn't catch it again. My wife had it this week.
I was ill last week.
You had?
Oh. Yeah, but it wasn't COVID this time, so.
Oh, okay. No, we did a quick test at home, and she had COVID. And I fear that maybe it was me who gave it to her, because I was ill for a few weeks before that. I mean, not terribly bad, but coughing and snoring, and you know, and then she caught COVID. We're not here to talk about COVID. We're here to talk about improving team collaboration using database projects in Azure DevOps. And I just posted in a team chat with my client to development teams that this is for you guys. Because we have done home cooked, migration style DDL updates to databases, and some teams have started using database projects, and we're in the transitioning phase to it. It's going to take time, but it's very promising so far, and I have worked with it before, and I really like it, although there are some caveats which I'm sure you will mention today. So I'll stop blabbing and let you do your presentation. Before you do, though, do you want me to interrupt you with questions, or will you stop for questions?
I tend to take questions at the end of the session. So
okay.
I will just go through. They're highly supported to get questions into the chat window. And then just after the session, I will stay in the meeting and just answer a couple of questions as well.
Cool. Good. Then I will mute and enjoy the show.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're joining from. I'm just going to remove this one. There we go. Welcome to my session about improving team collaboration using database projects and Azure DevOps. Before I start the session, of course, a big thanks for having me today, and of course to the attendees for being here during their possible lunch times. My name is Olivier van Steenlandt. I'm a BI team lead working for X2O. X2O is a retail organization located in Belgium with stores in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. At X2O, I'm mainly known as the person who makes BI development planning and the person who is trying to optimize the BI development and deployment flows. In my spare time, I'm a core member for Datamines. For the people who don't know Datamines, Datamines is the Belgian data user group focusing on the Microsoft data platform. Besides Datamines, I do a bit of speaking and blogging as well, mainly about topics where I'm running into on my day-to-day job. So it's always about personal experience. In case you have any questions, SQL questions, data questions, BI-related questions, please feel free to reach out. You can contact me via the details in front of you on the screen. So you can contact me via my personal website, via email, via Twitter or X nowadays, even via LinkedIn is fine as well. Just reach out and we'll see what we can work out. Then, today, I'm going to take you on a journey that I've been experiencing in the past couple of years. So first, I will set the scene and explain where I was, let's say, 7 years ago. Then I will start to explain how we were able to transition as a development team to work in a more flexible way. Then, of course, the main part of this session will go about how to get started with database projects and Azure DevOps. So it really will be a 101 session today. Near the end of the presentation, I will already give you a couple of pointers as well on topics where you can start to look into as well, after you have done or after you have set the basic correctly. And finally, we're just going to have a very small recap about benefits and at least one challenge where you will be running into. So, a couple of years ago, I was working in a rather small development team, mainly consisting of 3 to 5 developers. In that point in time, we were having 2 environments available, a development environment and a production environment. And as a matter of process, we were keeping track of all changes manually, meaning, of course, well, every object we touched, every logic we changed, every configuration or parameter we added or adjusted was kept track of manually. Where? Well, on a development ticket, in a Word file, in an Excel file, and at that point in time, we tried email as well. Let's say that wasn't the best solution. That can get quite messy quite fast. Then, as a matter of tools, we were mainly using SQL Server Management Studio as main tool for development, which of course is a very convenient way of working, but had a couple of challenges as well. And at that point in time, we were having larger challenges that we really would like to overcome. One of these challenges, for example, was moving big projects to production. So what typically happened was, well, as soon as we reached the go to move something to production, well, we first need to find out which development tickets are involved. Then, of course, if we documented anything in the development ticket, in the Word file, in the Excel file, perhaps in the emails, as soon as we gathered that information, we only could start preparation for our deployments as well. And don't get me wrong, these deployments were really time consuming. So it possibly could take us an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, and for big projects, even a day or more. So it really was time consuming. As soon as preparation was done, we started deployment. During these deployments, we needed to make changes immediately. Why? Well, our migration scripts and upgrade scripts weren't particularly set up in the right order and so on. Then, after deployment, we were executing test launches as well. Yeah, we did that. And after these test launches, we typically needed to bug fix straight away as well. Why? Well, we were still missing objects, missing configuration, missing parameters, and so on. So, as you can hear, preparing or preparement and deployment already was quite a hassle. In an ideal situation, what you actually would like to do is being able to, let's say, prepare and deploy in a matter of minutes, maybe, then firing up test launches. And as soon as these test launches are finished, you actually want to go out with your team and start celebrating your victory of moving that one project to production. In my case, it would definitely be with a decent glass of Belgian beer. Unfortunately, of course, at that point in time, we weren't able to. A second example, for example, is priority changes. So, especially when I just started to work in the first 4 to 5 years, I was always struggling with priority changes. And let's take a look at this one from a business point of view. And let's say we are a beer manufacturing company, but a very small one with only one production line. And at this point in time, we're brewing the latte triple bottled at that production line. And the development team is currently making changes to that one production line and is already making changes for quite a while. So mainly a couple of weeks, let's say. And at that point in time, management is running into the office and is explaining to the development team, well, we need to act really fast since customer demand is rising for draft beer, for example. Well, at that point in time, the development team was required to disappoint the management team since they didn't have any kind of way to go back to a stable state of the production line before they start to make the improvements. And on top of that, they still required a couple of more weeks to finalize these changes. So this is really something that we don't really want to. Then a third example is unwanted changes in production. So a couple of years ago, when I was working at a certain company, we were allowed to come into the office in the morning and take a look at quick wins. And let's say that a quick win is a development task of 30-ish minutes, preferably a bit less, of course. And we were allowed to come into the office in the morning, execute development for these quick wins, one a day, of course, or one a week sometimes. Then we were validating them on our own by noon. And in the afternoon, we were already deploying these changes to production. Of course, what typically happened was, well, we were deploying way too much to production. So instead of deploying the changes for the draft beer, we were already pushing our brand new beer on our production environment, which of course is a shame because we were delivering only a mediocre product to our end users. Then, the final example is code went missing. So a couple of years ago as well, when I was working still in that small development team, we were required as a company policy actually, to use a certain, well, let's call it bug fixing strategy. And we were required to execute our bug fixes in production first. Why? Well, the business wanted us, or my manager back in the days wanted us to minimize day-to-day business impact and solve the issue as soon as possible in the production environment first, and only afterwards we were allowed to copy our changes or our bug fix back to the development environment. Of course, what typically happened was, well, sorry, we were forgetting to copy the code back. Of course, during a future deployment, we were overriding our bug fixes as well, so we were delivering empty bottles of beer without the liquid gold inside, without our already built knowledge inside, which of course is a shame and really leads to unhappy management and co-workers as well. So we have a couple of things that we really would like to improve. Now, if we quickly summarize what goes wrong, first of all, as a development team, we were failing because of human mistake. Why? Well, I already mentioned it a couple of times, but we didn't document properly. We didn't copy code back to the development environment. We didn't create our migration script properly, and so on. Then something which is really important as well, from my point of view, is we were failing on team communication as well. Why? Well, I know I didn't really mention that during the examples, but if we were properly communicating within our own team of 3 to 5 developers, well, a lot of issues could be avoided, and at least anyone who was executing a deployment, for example, could first find out if a bug fix was made previously and quickly validate it. Unfortunately, of course, at that point in time, we didn't. And then, of course, code management, where we're here for today. So if there was a proper code management system in place, then we could have overcome, let's say, 90 to 95% of these issues. So now it is time to take a look at the future. So what are we going to do? I'm going to advise you to get a third environment in place, at least. For today, I will be calling this environment the acceptance environment, but you could call it the pre-production environment as well, depending on your preference, of course. And where are we going to use this environment for? Well, first of all, I want to use this environment for deployment testing, just to make sure that everything is deploying properly and so on. And then, even more important, I actually want to use this environment to get business involved in an earlier stage than development, or than production, sorry. If we can get that done, I really hope to give business a certain feeling of ownership about the changes that they're asking as well. That's why we're going to use the acceptance environment. Then we're going to introduce automatic change tracking. Of course, well, it only will be automatic if we're going to apply a certain set of tools as well. The tools that we're going to introduce are, first of all, Git. Git is a file-based comparison system. So what it basically will do is it will take your original file and a modified file, and then it's going to compare and see what has been changed on a line level. That's basically what Git does. Then we're going to introduce Azure DevOps as well. Azure DevOps will be the location where we are going to host our source code for our databases. Then I am going to introduce you to Visual Studio with the SQL Server Data Tools extension. If you want to, you can use Azure Data Studio as well, or Visual Studio Code as tool for development. But for today, I will be showing you how to work with Visual Studio. And then, of course, the big question is, what are we going to do with Management Studio? Well, you can still use Management Studio, but it would be more from a validation point of view. Cool. So if we quickly talk about database projects, then it is important to know what a database project is. So a database project allows us to execute more project-oriented database development. If we take a look at the left-hand side of the screen, right there, we can see a screenshot of Management Studio with the worldwide importers database open and with the familiar folder structure of tables, views, store procedures, and so on. If we now take a look at the right-hand side of the screen, right there, we can see an example database project for that same database and more or less with the same folder structure. So I can still recognize tables, views, store procedures, functions, and so on. the key takeaway right here is that the folder structure in your database project, so in Visual Studio, is your own responsibility. You can go wild, you can go crazy if you really want to. Just make sure that the folder structure is very clear for your team and for yourself, of course, as well. Then, what is important to mention about database projects as well? First rule, don't ever mention database names in scripts. This is really important. I will explain you why. A couple of years ago, when I was working in that small development team, they really enjoyed to have the environment name in the database name. So what they typically did was saying, well, database name _ development or _ dev, database name _ ACC for acceptance. And you know what? For production, leave the suffix behind. So just the database name. If you're using hard-coded database names in scripts, then you won't be able to deploy your code from environment to environment. So please avoid that. In case you need to refer to external tables or external objects in general, you still can, but then you will need to make use of something which is called SQL command variables. This allows you to define database names during deployment, which can be really useful as well. Then there's something to mention about indexes as well. So you can actually do two different things with index. You can say, well, I want to include my indexes in my database projects, which is perfectly fine. On the other hand, you can say, well, I actually don't want to. Both options are valid. Just know if you do, it might be that your deployment time in the end will increase. The reason why is, well, if you're keeping all indexes in your database project, and you're, for example, changing a column of data type of a column, well, it will first drop all indexes, recreate the table, recreate all indexes. Just be aware of it, and you should be good to go. Sorry about that. And then the last thing I want to mention about publishing is something about publishing profiles. A publishing profile is an XML file where you can store deployment properties into. So, for example, do you always want to deploy database properties? Or what do you want to do if there might be data loss during a deployment? Or even more important, if you don't include your indexes in your database project, do you want to drop your indexes on your target server if they're not available in your database project? This is a really important one, and it's something I will be highlighting during the demo as well. Now, we're going to introduce Azure DevOps as well. For today, I will be only showing you how to work with Azure DevOps repos, which will be the location where we're going to host our source code for our databases. But just know, in case you don't have a development ticketing system yet, it might be interesting to take a look at Azure DevOps boards. And if you want to take a look at database deployment automation, then it might be interesting to take a look at Azure DevOps pipelines as well. Now, if we take a close look to Azure DevOps repos, and for today, the Git way of working, then it is important to know that Git is a distributed version control system. This means that every developer will be working on a local version of the code. And this really is a key concept and it's really important to understand very well. Then, if you're working with Git, you will hear a lot about branching as well. Branching actually is nothing more or nothing less than creating a copy of existing code. That's branching. Then, to finalize this section, the most important Git commands are, well, first of all, pull to get all the changes or code-based changes from the remote to a local machine. Then push, or actually commit and push to get your changes that you have been making locally first committed to your local repository and then push to the remote. And then merge. Merging actually is nothing more or nothing less than the process to combine two branches back to one. That's merging. Today, I'm going to introduce you to a branching strategy, which I'm using all the time, which is branching per feature or feature branching. People like to call it trunk-based development as well. And the key concepts here are, well, first of all, we will always have a main branch, or often called master branch as well. Especially in the more traditional development teams, it's called the master branch. This branch should always contain your production version of the code. No exceptions made here. So this is really important to understand. Then what we're going to do as well, we're going to create a development branch, which always should contain our development version of the code. And the development branch is something that you always need to be able to recreate based on the main branch and the separate feature branches. So, which brings me, of course, to feature branches. What is a feature branch? The one there in the middle. For every single development task that you're going to execute, you're going to create a feature branch. So, for example, I want to add a column to a certain view. Well, I'm creating a feature branch based on my main branch or master branch. Why? Well, this is really important to be really flexible. If I'm using this kind of strategy, I can easily, well, start to play around with priorities, for example, since, well, I can easily deploy my changes that I just made today and compared to the one I was developing yesterday. So this is something that works really well. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to create a feature branch. Then we're going to execute development on our local machine on the feature branch. As soon as everything is finished, we're going to commit our changes and push them to the remote to make sure that our colleagues can continue validating or working on our changes. Then we're going to merge our feature branch to the development branch and deploy our development branch to the development environment. As soon as this is done, we can actually start our validation process as well. If we're validating on the development environment and something goes wrong, then it's important to get your changes into your feature branch. This is really important and not onto the development branch directly. But if everything goes right, then we can easily merge our feature branch with the main branch and deploy the main branch to our production environment. This will become clear a bit later during the demo as well, don't worry. Now, what are the biggest challenges with source control? First of all, merge conflicts. And if you're as patient as I am, then you will probably run into merge conflicts with the SQL project file sooner than later, actually. This is, for some reason, one file which is always causing issues, but it's fairly easy to solve. Then it needs to become a habit to, if you, for example, want to merge your feature to the development environment, it needs to become a habit to check out your development branch, then pull in all changes for the development branch before you execute your merge process from your feature branch to your development branch. Then there's something to tell about branch maintenance as well. If you're going to use a manual branching strategy, then there will be some branch maintenance involved. What I mean with this is, well, for every single feature, you're going to create a feature branch. You're merging them manually to your development environment. And later on, you're merging them to your production environment as well. Of course, as soon as this step has been completed, you need to remove these branches as well. So this can be a quite a very time-consuming thing to do as well. And then, to be fair, the biggest challenge of them all is people. I really know this sounds really silly, but people is your biggest challenge. Everybody needs to be working in the same way, or source control and Azure DevOps doesn't work. It is as easy as that. Now, I've been talking a lot theoretically. I suggest we get into the more practical side. So let me quickly share screen. There we go. So what are we going to do? This one, yeah, perfect. So what did I do? I opened up Visual Studio and I went to the right-hand corner and opened the Solution Explorer. In that Solution Explorer, I already created a solution SQL Friday. And in that solution, I already created my very first database project called AdventureWorks LT. Now, as a first step during the demo, we actually are going to create a very brand new database project based on an existing database. To get this done, we're going to navigate to the left-hand side of the screen. That's the wrong one. This one, there we go. And I've opened up the SQL Server Object Explorer. I have connected to my local instance of SQL Server 2019. And right there, I have the AdventureWorks data warehouse database available. This is one that we're going to use during our first example. So to get things done, we can actually easily right-click on the database and say Create New Project. This is launching the Create New Project window, and then we need to go through a couple of steps. So first, we need to give our target project a name. So AdventureWorks Data Warehouse. Then we need to choose the location, which in my case is right here. There we go, select folder. And then I actually want to highlight this one. So first of all, I won't be bothering too much about the import settings for today, but I want to highlight the folder structure. In case you really like the folder structure as you know it from Management Studio, then I would advise you to use the object type folder structure. This is it isn't completely the same, but it's the most familiar to what you know in Management Studio. So for today, we're going to choose that one, object type, there we go, and say start. At this point in time, Visual Studio is first going to create a brand new database project, and then it's going to import all the objects into the database project. While Visual Studio is doing all the hard work, I'm going to show you something else. This isn't important, there we go. So before you can get started with database projects, you will need to have the SQL Server Data Tools extension installed. To find out if you have, you can easily navigate to the top center. In Visual Studio, go to Tools and say Get Tools and Features. This is going to launch the Visual Studio installer. This might take a moment, so we need to play the waiting game. And there we go. If we now navigate to the right-hand side, go to Data Storage and Processing, we want to find out if SQL Server Data Tools is enabled. In my case, of course, it is. If you can't find the option right there, just scroll down in the Visual Studio installer to other tool sets and take a look for Data Storage and Process, enable it and install it, and you're good to go. Now, in the meanwhile, Visual Studio has done all the hard work for us. If we take a quick look, well, it finished importing the database. It created a log file for us. To be really honest, I've never taken a look at this log file before, never. And everything was finalized. So we just hit finish. Now, if we want to execute a quick validation, I know it isn't completely right, but just as a matter of example, we had 5 different views in our target database, and we have at least 5 in our database project. So it seems to be quite okay. That's it. So this is how you can import a single database into a brand new database project. Now I have a designated example as well. And for that one, I'm quickly going to open it. I'm going to use, and let me quickly enlarge it a bit. There we go. So for the second example, it's a really specific use case, but something where I was struggling with, especially in the beginning, was we're going to use the AdventureWorks LT database. And let's say that this database is a third-party vendor-owned database. So it's not in our ownership, and we only have an agreement to create certain objects, and we definitely are not allowed to change existing objects. So let's say for today that the only view that we're allowed to maintain is the view per category, that one. This one is in our ownership, and of course, since it's ours, I want to have it in source control as well. So how can we handle this one? Well, this goes a bit differently. If we go back to the Solution Explorer on the right, we right-click on our AdventureWorks LT project, go to Add, New Folder, and we are creating our Views folder. The reason why I'm doing this is, well, I won't be able to import the folder structure, and so I will need to create it myself. And now the moment of truth, this was what I'm going to do right now was a bug in Visual Studio. So I really hope it's solved by now. So I'm just going to drag and drop my view into the views folder. There we go. Oh, please. There we go. It works. Until a couple of weeks ago, this wasn't working in Visual Studio 2022. So if we now take a look at our newly created view. So this seems to be quite okay. But if I'm going to build this one, and I'm going to explain what the build process is, but for now, We'll just go through the errors. As you can see, this view is providing a lot of issues at this point in time. If we take a closer look, it is saying, well, this view has an unresolved reference to schema CLSLT. It has an unresolved reference to objects, unresolved reference to object, unresolved. Well, I think you get the point. What is happening right here is that, well, we have imported our view, but we didn't import all the dependent objects. So that really is what is causing these kind of issues. And we will need to find a way to overcome this challenge. So this will be a multi-step process. And as a first step, we are going to the Solution Explorer, navigate to the file, right-click, and go to Properties. And in the Properties, we can find a certain setting called the build action. Now, what does this build action setting do? Well, by default, every single file gets build action built. This means that the file will be included in the default build and deployment process if there are changes. Well, in the deployment process, if there are changes, it will always be included in the build process. Of course, what you need to know is during the build process, a couple of things will be validated as well. And of course, if the depending objects are available, will be checked as well. So we can't use the build action at this point in time. So for now, we are going to choose none. So we quickly change to none. There we go. I'm going to save it. And as you can see, all my errors disappear. Problem solved. That's useful. Well, of course, this also tells the system to completely ignore this file during the default build and deployment process, which is, of course, something that we don't want to, since we really want to be able to deploy the changes as well. Now, to get that done, I'm going to navigate back to the right-hand side, going to right-click on my database project, go to Add, New Item. And I'm going to search for a certain file. I'm going to type in post, and I'm going to introduce you to a post-deployment script. There we go. So what is a post-deployment script? Yeah, there we go. So this file contains SQL statements that will be appended to the build script. The keyword right here is appended. Please keep this one in mind. Then let's explain something that we can use SQL command syntax to include the file in the post-deployment script. So let's try that one out. So what we need to do, for example, is, well, r double point, views, and this shouldn't be there. There we go. Views, and then view product category.sql. There we go. And we are good to go. Yeah, cool. Everything is fine right now. Well, not completely. The reason why is the appended word was the magic word in this file. What this is going to do is it's during the build and, well, actually during the build phase, it will build your project. Then it's going to compare what is different with your target server during the deployment process. And it will be creating a change script. This file need to include every single file that you want to append to that deployment script at the bottom of the file. So if we take a quick look at our view per category, this means that it will always say create view. If you're using the build action, then it would automatically detect if it needs to be created, altered, dropped, and so on. But if you're using a post-deployment script, it won't. So then we need to assist it. So what we can do, for example, is say, well, create or alter view. That's fine. Or we can say drop view if exists, CLSLT view per category. And right here, it is important to add a go as well. Otherwise, it won't work. And now we are good to go. So what are we going to do next? This is the moment we have created our very first version of our database project. It is time to get it into Azure DevOps. So if we take a quick look at Azure DevOps right here, I'm currently signed in in Azure DevOps, I've created my organization, and I create the project called SQL Friday. And if I go to the left-hand side to repos, you can see I have a backup repo in case the demo codes are not very happy today. I still can use this one, but we are going to create a brand new repository from Visual Studio. So if we go back to Visual Studio and we navigate to the right bottom corner this time, we can see that Visual Studio was actually already giving us a hint like, well, it might be interesting to add it to source control at some point. So let's take the advice. So git, and this opens up this window. And what we need to do, and this is really cool, especially in comparison with Visual Studio 2019, for example. Right now, they are making it a lot easier since we have an Azure DevOps component in this screen to set our source control. So if we use that one, we want to connect to Azure DevOps. This is fine. My account, that's correct. My organization is the one I've shown you previously. And I want to connect to my SQL Friday project. There we go. Again, this might take some time. There we go. Oh, please. It's having a rough time today. Oh, SQL Friday. Yeah, no, it was cool. So save. What is this doing in the back at this point in time is it's first initializing the local Git repository on your local machine. Then it is creating a connection to Azure DevOps, and then it's pushing the repository to the remote. So everything should be fine right now, so we can quickly validate in Azure DevOps. So if I quickly refresh, go to my brand new repository, SQL Friday, then you can see, well, everything was last changed just now. So we have our very first version in source control. And this is the point in time where you can be proud. This is also the time that all your coworkers can start to benefit from the hard work that you have been doing. So next up, we will start and execute some development. Before I do, I will navigate to the top right here. And instead of master, I'm going to create a new branch, which I will be calling development. There we go. Based on master, that's fine, create. This is something you can do in Visual Studio as well. Yeah, so let's get back to Visual Studio. Right here, cool. And right now, we're going to navigate again to the right bottom corner. As you can see right here, I'm connected to my local master branch. And now I want to create my feature branch, which we're going to develop. So I'm clicking on master, choosing new branch. And then I'm required to provide a branch name. In my case, I find it a good practice to start with, well, I'm developing a feature. If it would be a bug fix, I would say bug fix, for example, or hotfix, whatever you would like to call it. But in this case, I'm going to create a feature with a / and then actually my ticket number, data warehouse ticket number 1. The reason why I'm using these prefixes with a / is if we're going to take a look at these in Azure DevOps, is if you're working in larger teams, the branches will be grouped into a certain kind of folder structure if you're using these kind of prefixes. If you use every feature branch will be grouped into a feature folder, every bug fix branch will be grouped into a bug fix folder, and so on. So feature data warehouse ticket 1. Then based on master, well, that could be fine, but I would advise you to go to remote and say origin master. Then you know for sure that you're working against the production version of the code. And then say create. So if we now go back to the right bottom corner once more, we can see we're working on our local feature data warehouse ticket 1 branch. So it is time to execute development. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to add a brand new column into our view. And as you can see, I've been very creative today. We're going to add product category description 2. So I'm just going to uncomment this one. There we go. I'm going to hit save. And we have made a change. How do I know? Well, if I navigate back to the right bottom corner, you can see that Visual Studio and Git have identified one change. If I click the pencil, there we go. The Git changes pane is opening. Now, what is happening right here? It shows me, well, we have identified a change on the view per category.sql file. What do you want to do with it? Well, I'm going to stage the change. Staging actually is explaining to Visual Studio and to Git, I want to do something with this file and I want to get it into Git. That's what you're actually doing. I want to get this change committed somewhere, or to somewhere at least. Then, before we are going to commit and push our changes, we need to add a message. And please make it a meaningful one. I'm not the best example, to be honest, but what I would be suggesting is that you're using your ticket number, in my case, data warehouse ticket number 1, and then explaining why you did something. In this case, for example, well, edit column for demo purposes to show how easy it can be to work with database projects and Azure DevOps. There we go. Now I know why this column was added. And then we can easily say commit staged and push. This is first going to, well, save my changes in my local Git repository and then pushing them to the remote as well to make sure that my colleagues can access these changes as well if required. As you can see, successfully pushed. And if we quickly validate in Azure DevOps, and this seems to be a bit small actually. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm going to minimize this one for a moment. So refresh. This can't be right. Last change 5 minutes ago. This can't be right. So I actually know what is going on. So what is happening, and this is something where I fell into quite a lot, especially in the beginning, was looking at the wrong branch. I was looking at the development branch. So if you want to validate something in Azure DevOps, please make sure that you're selecting the right branch. In this case, of course, feature data warehouse 1. And right here, you can see who updated just now. So just keep in mind to take a look at the right branch. This happened to me quite a lot, especially in the beginning. Now, we are going back to Visual Studio, and it is time to get our change into the development environment. So to get that done, we're going to navigate once more to the right bottom corner. Believe me, this will be your favorite corner of Visual Studio. You will know all about it. This is the one you really need to work with source control. So what are we going to do? We're going to merge our feature branch into our development branch. To get this done, we're going to click on our feature branch. Of course, we don't have the development branch local yet, but we created it remotely, so it should be available. So we go to remotes, but hey, where is it? I can't see the origin development. Well, during the slides, I explained to you the 3 most important commands. I left the 4th one out on purpose, to be fair. The 4th command, if you're going right here, is fetch. The fetch command is going to make sure that you get branch-based changes. And what do I mean with branch-based? Well, if somebody is adding a branch to the remote, removing a branch from the remote, this will get these kind of changes in. Okay, so if I'm click fetch, this might take a while. There we go. If I go now back to remote, you can see I have the development branch available. So I just click the development branch and it's checking out the development branch with the most recent version. Now we can execute our merge. So please take a look right here. As I'm just going to click on my development branch, right click on my feature branch and say merge into current branch. Do I want to merge? Yes. And there we go. Now we have made our change available in the development branch, but what is important, the change only became available on our local machine at this point in time. How do I know? Well, at the bottom right corner, of course, it is showing me, well, there is one change ready to be pushed to the remote. And this change actually contains our merge that we've been executing. So if we right now click on the push button on the right top corner, and therefore we don't need to provide the message since it will be containing a message like merged this branch into development. There we go. So if we now go back to the to Azure DevOps and navigate to the development branch, we can see something changed right here, and we even can say my commit message as well. So now it is deployment time. So what are we going to do? We're going to the Solution Explorer. We are going to right-click on our solution and say publish. Sorry about that. As the first step in the publish, if we want to publish, the first step actually is the build process, as mentioned before. During the build process, a couple of validation steps are executed about dependencies, syntax errors, and so on. Then, during the build process, 3 different files get generated. The model XML file, a DLL file, and the most important one, the AdventureWorks backpack file. Just that you know, if you ever want to find out what is included in a deckpack file, you just need to replace the .deckpack extension with .zip, extract all, and take a look inside, or take a look what's included. This might be fun for once, just to find out what it actually does. Then, as soon as the build process has been completed successfully, it's opening the publish database window. Right there, the first thing we need to do is, well, we need to connect to our target database connection. In my case, AdventureWorks LT 2019 on my local host. There we go. And then before I'm going to hit publish, I'm going to the advanced section. And right here, we get the advanced publish settings. And these are pretty important. So the first one I want to discuss is the deploy database properties, as mentioned before as well. In the use case about what we have done for development right now, in this case, where we have been adjusting that one particular view in a database that is not ours, I don't want to deploy database properties. So I will be unmarking this one. Then, to be fair, this one has been a lifesaver for me a couple of times. Block incremental deployment if data loss might occur. So as soon as the deployment process identifies potential data loss, it will just stop your deployment, which is pretty important. Of course, if you, for example, want to remove a column from a database, from an existing table, for example, then you will need to unmark this one, or otherwise your deployment will fail. But by default, I would advise you to keep it enabled, please. Okay, cool. Then we're going to the drop section of this window. And we need to be standing still with these ones as well, especially the last one. As mentioned before, if you choose to exclude your indexes from your database projects, make sure to unmark these ones. Why? Well, been there, done that. I forgot it once before I started to work with publishing profiles, where we will get to in a couple of moments. I was always doing the configuration by hand every single deployment, and all of a sudden I just forgot about it. So I deployed my changes to my production environment, and an hour later I found out I dropped all my indexes because I didn't include my indexes in my database project. So if you want to avoid to have a very fun afternoon at work, or evening, or even night, if it's a really large environment, please make sure to unmark this one if you don't include your database, your index in your database project. So what are we going to do? We're going to unmark this ones and say OK. Now we can execute our deployment, or we can create our publishing profile. So if we say save profile as, we can easily save our deployment settings. There we go. My meaningful name for today. And before we execute the publish button, I want to show you how the publishing profile is looking like. It is something like this. So what can we see? Well, it shows the target database name. It shows the connection string that I'm going to use. It shows what to do on possible data loss as well, of course, and then indexes and so on. So every single configuration that we've been made has been saved into this XML file. Now we just need to double click our publishing profile on the right. There we go. It is executing the build phase, launching the publish database window with every single setting preloaded as well, which of course is pretty useful. And right now we just need to hit the publish button. And now we need to play the waiting game. Did I do it actually? Okay, there we go. This might take some time. And there we go. Okay. So if we take a quick look, it has created the publish preview. It created the database script. It executed the script on my target server, and everything was successfully all that in 13 seconds. I really hope that I can convince you that this was a game changer for me. Why? In the past, it was taking up hours or days to prepare and deploy. Today, deployment took 13 seconds and preparation 2 minutes maybe. So in a couple of minutes, we were able to prepare and deploy, of course, to our development environment, but it basically will be the same to our production environment as well. And then, of course, you can say, well, we only made a very tiny change in a very small database. You're absolutely right. To be fair, I've been using this way of working in larger environments as well. And even there, database deployments, preparation and deployments actually only take a couple of minutes. So it really is gaining me time personally, for example. That's that. Cool. We were able to deploy to our development environment. Now I want to show you one more thing in Visual Studio. If I go to my view product category file, right click, go to Git, and say view history. And now I'm going to minimize this a little bit. There we go. What this is showing me, well, this is showing me the version of this file. So I can see who made a change to the file, when the change was made, why the change was made, and where the change currently is, actually. I'm using this screen quite often, just to know where my changes are, why a change was made, and I even can easily, well, select both commits, right-click, and say compare. And this isn't showing up very well, but let me. There we go. So right here, I can easily see what has been changed as well, which is, of course, very useful. I'm using this quite often. Now, if we go to Azure DevOps, since right now we were able to deploy to development, and we want to deploy to production in the end as well, of course. So what do we want to do? I'm going to show you something which can avoid you to have branch maintenance in the end. So I'm going to introduce you to pull requests. And we're going to say create new pull request, not from development, but from our feature branch. So it provides a title, a description, and then I'm going to say required reviewer. Well, I'm a one-man team for today, so I will be the reviewer as well. And then I just hit create. By creating pull request, you're actually introducing peer reviewing, which is pretty powerful, to be honest. This makes sure that somebody else needs to revise your code before it can go to or move to a certain environment. And now let's say we're the reviewer right now, and we go to files. Okay, so the change was made to that certain file that was showing up right here. There we go. And then we can see which change was made. So for me, the change seems to be quite okay. So I'm going to approve, and then I'm going to complete. And right here is the one that I actually wanted to highlight, this one. So delete feature branch 1 after merging. There we go. And then we just complete the merge. And then we're good to go to deploy to production. Now, this is everything I want to show you during this demo. So let's head back to the presentation for a brief recap as well, since we're almost on time. And I need to change once more. There we go. Oh, please. Moving forward. So today I have been showing you how to set up database projects in 2 different ways. Then I have been showing you as well how to set up Azure DevOps as well. I actually showed you how to link your local database project to Azure DevOps and get it in Azure DevOps, of course. And then we've been talking about branching as well. Then and I know it was really fast, but I showed you how to work with pull requests as well. And I really would advise you to use this straight away, actually, the pull request. You can start without, but I would advise you to get started with pull requests as well. Now, if we take a look at future next steps, then there are actually two that are really coming into mind for me. They're not in a particular order, but you might be thinking about test automation. If you want to, it might be interesting to take a look at certain test automation frameworks or unit testing frameworks. For SQL, for example, it might be that you're looking for T-SQL-T. And then, of course, deployment automation. So, and for this, of course, it might be interesting to take a look at Azure DevOps pipelines. Now, benefits and challenges. I really hope I was able to show you today how easy it can be to set up a database project, get it into Azure DevOps, and start to actually development in that way. Then, a big benefit for me, for example, is that we finally will have a clear changelog for every single object in our database project without having to document anything on development tickets in a Word file, Excel file, email, and so on. Of course, documentation still needs to be done, but not about what has been changed technically, since that is something we can handle just by checking commits for a certain file. Then I hope then I really hope that I could show you that the efficiency of deployment is improving as well. For me personally, I went from hours or days to a couple of minutes to deploy. At this point in time, in my current team where I'm working, we're deploying more than once a week, and it takes us a couple of minutes to deploy, maybe 5 or 10, to more databases as well. So it's really a very easy process to handle, to be fair. Then the benefits of pull requests is, as mentioned before, you will be improving your development quality a lot. Because, of course, somebody else needs to revise your work before something gets to the next environment. And then, of course, to finalize, the biggest challenge will be people, or changing habits in this case. So everybody will need to change their way of working, and this really asks some adaptation in the beginning, but as soon as you get used to it, it really becomes very useful and handy. And it will improve your development speed as well. Now, that being said, we are on time. So I would like to thank everyone for being here this afternoon. My name is Olivier van Steenlandt. I really hope you learned something new today. In case there are any questions tomorrow, next week, next month, feel free to reach out. If you want to have the slides, I will be uploading them to GitHub later today. And of course, if there are any questions right now, I would be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.